listener. They constantly surprise us, both in amazing ways and not so much. We're Ben and Syya, and welcome to the On This Business Bites podcast. This show is all about real-life things we all deal with every day, how they relate to business, and how to make some sense out of our daily chaos. Welcome to the show. And welcome back to another episode of On This Business Bites. I'm Ben and this is Syya. And this week we want to talk about legacy versus next gen. Now, we've just in the last year gone through the coronation, King Chuck, King Charles, whatever you want to call him.
Chucky.
Chucky, Elizabeth, don't forget, Elizabeth, who was queen my entire life. And now we've gone through this generational change. And in the wings are sitting the next two kings. We have William and William's son, George. And we have this entire generation of, we know what's coming up next. And the question is, how is that legacy going to be brought from generation to generation? And the question is, how do you equate that to business? From the person that in 1926 came across on a boat from Europe somewhere and started this small little store. And today his grandchildren are running a $60 billion organization, and that there is those stories. And the question is, how do we maintain that company legacy? And how do we make sure that from generation to generation that those companies maintain their brand, they maintain their relevance, and they maintain, their value in society? So, see, you seem to have a lot to say on this off air. So let's have this conversation start with you.
Oh, well, you are part of the Commonwealth, young man.
But I am.
And it's so funny because so many of your Commonwealth brethren,
yes.
Brethren. I'm going to learn how to speak English. Is it brethren? Okay.
Brethren. Yes.
This could be well, I don't think a lot of Americans
we'll teach you how to speak English properly. It's okay. I understand, that you need a lesson, but that's okay.
Okay, look, I use American English here.
You do American real well, yes.
Okay, you're making me digress, but there is a TikTok guy who actually does a history of English rooted words and the English pronunciation versus American. And he said there's a lot of words that the Americans actually say more properly of the English origin versus the current English version. Just saying, English.
Okay, anyway, there we go.
So, yeah. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I find it fascinating is this is not a discussion about monarchy or not to monarchy. Okay, let me just be very clear. I just happened to have watched the coronation, a little bit of it, and it was just, for the historical perspective, amazing. Like, we'd never seen anything of this caliber, at least from my existence, right? The last time was in 75 years. Yeah. I mean, it was just amazing. And it's in color, no less, like super color. But where I think this is so applicable to business is the Walton family, for example. Okay, let's talk about the Walmart folks. Sam Walton started from nothing. It was like a 5 and dime. Literally, it was a 5 and dime, shop. And he was able to grow it, right? And his grandchildren, great grandchildren now are 5 of them are the top 4. Do you like that 5? It's gonna be a long show. It's gonna be a long show, sir.
That's right. We'll do 3 and 2. Okay, we'll just do 3 and 2.
Like, I'll just go this many.
Minus, there we go.
Are the richest people in the United States, and it's a retail business, right? These guys are all billionaires, right? So how does one transfer that generational wealth and insights and maintain the integrity and of what made that business grow, right? I think it's a struggle all businesses have to, especially fast growing ones, have to address, right? We talk about company culture all the time. And sometimes the cult of personality, if you will, of that CEO was what made that company happen. So when the next CEO comes, there's a lot of struggle of that next generation exchange. So a good example would be Steve Jobs and then Cook, I think his last name for Apple. Yeah. Right.
That's there was between Jobs and Cook, there were There were
quite a
some
bit.
things in between, but yeah, okay.
But that's the challenge is,
Yep.
okay, so in business, you might be that amazing Queen Elizabeth, right? So what are
Hmm.
you doing to groom Chucky Poo here, Charles? Oh, sorry, no disrespect to my UK royalists. King Charles III, which by the way, I thought was very interesting that he went with Charles III, considering the history of one and two. But anyway, especially one. Um, is are you grooming your next generation to be a smooth transition? And I feel I'm going to argue this, audience. You tell me if I'm full of you know what. Harder said than done. I do not see a very frequently successful transitions. Do you, or have you seen anything? Because I don't think I've seen anyone that has done it well, Ben.
Well, I mean, it's interesting when you take a look at it because you look at Sam Walton, for example. Sam Walton was horrified when he was announced to be the richest person in the world. It was mortifying to him because all of a sudden it was attention that he didn't want, and he still drove around his property in a pickup truck with a gun rack and went pheasant hunting into his 70s with cancer and everything. He was who he was. He, like him, love him, hate him. Sam Walton was who he was. And the generations below them, it came to the fact that when they grew into the business, grew into a position where the business was already successful and was already a multi-billion-dollar organization. And therefore, that legacy, that whole life of hardship of growing from one store to 30 stores to 50 stores to 100 stores to 500 stores to 1,000 stores, they don't have that. They don't have that. You know, history behind them in terms of being part of that struggle. So therefore, when they're taking over the company, they're taking over a multi-billion-dollar company with hundreds of thousands of employees and systems and technology. And therefore, they look at the company completely different from where their father and their grandfather and their great-grandfather did. And they also walk into the business with multiple billions of dollars. It's like, Bill Gates, who we talk about all the time. He says his children will not be wealthy.
Yeah.
He's basically saying, I'm giving away 90 to 98% of my money is already earmarked for charity. My kids will end up with 10, $20 million, whatever they're going to end up with.
I was just gonna say, can we say wealthy, relatively speaking, please?
No,
Because they're
but
still gonna be
when you're
millionaires.
a multi-billion-dollar family,
Yeah.
with private security and everything that goes along with it,
Yeah.
and vacations in the south of France in your own private villa, and all of a sudden you're down to a paltry $20 million. You can't have the same lifestyle that you did when you were a multi-billionaire. And therefore, you're going to hopefully live a life going, okay, I need to make it on my own. I need to do this on my own. Yes, I have a better head start than 99% of the kids out there, but I don't have the wherewithal to have the lifestyle I did when I was a kid. And I think that's a mentality shift.
No, it
You know,
is. But honestly, I'm sorry. I just boo hoo. I'm sorry.
Oh, listen,
I don't
I
have a
put
ton of
$20
empathy.
million
But
dollars in the bank, and I'd live quite comfortably in a 2,100 square foot house, and
yeah.
and drive a 10-year-old car. But I never lived a billionaire's lifestyle.
Right. That's a true statement. No. So, okay. So let's talk about this because, like the British royal family, there is a succession challenge, right? Because
Sure.
there was a push from a cultural perspective. Now, granted, legally in the monarchy, the way it ran, there was legally no way this was ever going to happen. But from a cultural perspective, there was a huge push of saying, like, screw, Charles, and go with William. Like, have him abdicate because William was the more accepted uh person. He is of age. He's 40 years old now, so he's not like he's like a 10-year-old like inheriting or anything
Mhm.
like that, where they need a regnant or anything like that.
Yeah,
But
where the crown doesn't fit because his head's too small.
too small. But let's think about this. King Charles, the reason why there was such pushback was because there was a question of his integrity. There was a question of him because of that whole unfortunate Diana marriage situation, right? So let's talk about this. Do you think from a business perspective, maybe you're grooming. So Ben, you're the successful executive and you had, Mary along with you, for all these careers, you guys known each other and you just kind of brought Mary along, or Billy. I don't care. Let's go with Sam. We'll call it
Sure.
Sam because it's androgynous. Okay. So Sam's been with you throughout, but Sam maybe didn't want to tell you, I might not be suited best for the job, or you're blinded by the fact that you've had Sam with you for so long that you're like, Sam, I'm promoting you. Sam, I'm promoting you, to the point where it's like, ooh, that Peter Principle level of incompetence kind of vibe. Where Sam fights you a little bit along the way, but they still get the role and they're not suited for it. Again, I'm kind of doing this analogy in a way that's like, Prince Charles, he never really wanted that kind of responsibility. He didn't want to marry Diana, for example, right? Do you think we do that same mistake because we're blinded by our allegiances to the people that we probably cultivated our own network around?
Well, family businesses for sure. I mean, family businesses for sure. That's a different animal altogether. That's a completely different conversation. But I've been part of 3 different family businesses, and there is no question that there is one set of rules if you're family, and one set of rules if you're not family. And the rules, even if the rules for family, those can be broken and everything's forgotten and forgiven. Now, if regular employees do the same thing, you're out the door. So there needs to be the understanding when you bring family along and you're grooming family for that you actually put them in a position of qualifying. Because here's the reality of a lot of businesses, and a lot of business brokers have told me, it takes 1 generation to build the business. It takes 1 generation to maintain the business, and the 3rd generation blows the business because the 3rd generation just wants the money. And the 3rd generation sits there and goes, okay, the company's worth $100 million. I'm going to take, $1 million salary because I think I should have it. And then I'm going to lease a Ferrari, and the company is going to pay for the lease of the Ferrari, and the company is going to lease a vacation home in the Caymans because that's for entertaining clients and everything that goes with it. And all of a sudden, these great companies get turned into they go down the toilet because there isn't that ability of that 3rd generation to understand what it takes to not only maintain but to grow the company beyond where it is. And I think that a lot of it comes down to the generations placating the next generation and say, oh, well, of course you're part of the family. Of course there's going to be a job for you. And of course we're going to make you a vice president. And of course you're going to move forward. And I think there really needs to be some harsh looks at it and says, are people qualified? Are people qualified to run companies? Are people given not only the responsibility, but they actually have the wherewithal within them and are trained effectively to be able to take over when their time comes? And I think that that's something that we as a company and we as leaders need to have a harsh look and sit there and say, are we setting people up for success?
Oh, man alive. I have not watched it, but all I can think of when you were saying that was Succession. Succession. It almost sounds like Obsession, like the
take a look at Yves Saint Laurent right now. I think it's Yves Saint Laurent, the whole dynasty, the one of the richest men in the world. He's got 5 children, and he's letting them fight amongst themselves right now as who's going to take over. So he's pitting his children against the children to decide who's going to get the brass ring.
Okay, see, I think there's something fundamentally wrong with that, but hey,
that happens all the time.
That's so bizarre to me. Oh my God. Okay, we could keep talking about this, Ben.
We could, but I think that that's a good place to finish, because I think everybody needs to sit there and think, just because they're my child, or they're my nephew, or they are my spouse, or whoever, we need to sit there and say, do we have the right people in the place that are qualified to be able to do the job? Or are we just hiring them because we feel obligated to do that? And I think that's a dangerous place to be. I'm Ben.
I'm Syya.
We'll see you soon.
Hey. Thanks for listening to another episode of Not on This, Business Bites. If you liked what you heard, we most humbly ask that you like, share, and hit that subscribe button. And if you want to communicate more effectively within your organization, contact Ben at yourbrandmarketing.com or me at brilliantbeammedia.com. We can help you build your community, brand awareness, and personality through digital content and podcasting. We cannot wait to hear from you. So see you next week for another episode of Not on This, Business Bites.